Okay, first of all, too soon. So in the same way that news of a Sonic Origins Plus first leaked, a Sonic Frontiers Definitive Edition was listed on the Game Rating and Administration Committee of Korea's website. And it sparked a lot of conversation over what a Sonic Frontiers Definitive Edition should be, what it will likely be, and I just wanted to throw my hat into the ring. I think the most likely thing is that this is just going to be a Switch 2 port that brings it up to speed with the other versions. Then I'm guessing, like with Sonic Origins Plus, they would have the upgrade path available, but also have a devoted physical edition. And I mean, we've definitely seen other editions of Sonic games before that haven't really changed anything. For example, the 30th anniversary edition of Team Sonic Racing. But the term Definitive Edition definitely suggests some kind of difference rather than just a port. And it's not like Sonic Frontiers has ever been untouchable. Sonic Frontiers is probably a very easy game to change. Its flaws are incredibly apparent, from both visual technical shortcomings to lackluster art direction to underbaked physics. Revisiting Sonic Frontiers once again would give them a chance to give it some much-needed polish, and rather than to rely on sliders chosen by the player, we could instead get a properly tuned Sonic with level design that is retuned to that. This could just be a matter of changing the size of certain platforms or the duration of certain rails. It doesn't have to be anything too fancy. You could even add in more level design elements that take full advantage of this new playstyle for Sonic, whether that be more sky platforming in the open zones or new cyberspace stages. I think pop-in is the number one problem that I think people would like to see fixed with Sonic Frontiers. There are transition animations in the game that could make the pop-in look 10 times nicer, and based on the fact that this is how platforms appear when triggered in a gameplay event, I don't doubt this is how the pop-in was meant to look in-game. Twitter user Super tried to implement it fully, and it actually looks pretty solid, but it did result in some lighting quirks. However, Sonic Team could probably figure that out. They could also maybe have more assets for the Ancient's architecture littered around the open zone to make the metal panels look a bit more functional and less just out of place. They could also make adjustments to certain minigames, such as the pinball, make it so you need less points, or have unlimited lives, I don't know. Final Horizon definitely could use a big glob of polish, but especially improved conveyance and balancing. As on hard mode, yes, the Master King trial is still fucking ridiculous to the point of looking like amateur hour, and you could add those shielding animations to the final boss's head so that it's a bit clearer that you have to actually whip round to the other side. I could go on and on, but Sonic Frontiers at the very least does need a bit of a technical overhaul. There are dozens of reasons for the shortcomings, such as lack of budget, lack of time, and I don't doubt the pandemic probably played a role as well. And just the generally more experimentational pipeline of Sonic Frontiers' production as well. I'm not trying to insult the devs or anything or say they're incompetent. All I'm trying to say is that Sonic Frontiers, love it or hate it, is a pretty shoddy product. So sure, you could do a re-release that brings it up to scratch, but there's one big problem with that. This is how a full-priced game should be on launch. The year is 2100 and Sega are still trying to finish Sonic Frontiers. It's no secret that Sonic Frontiers was viewed as a global playtest internally at Sega to better determine what players actually want from Sonic going forward, as Sonic Forces really played it safe and still managed to be quite a poorly received game. So I do appreciate that Sega wanted to kind of keep the fans involved, keep the dialogue open, with a game that they would continually add to and just get the basics right with. That said, I can't help but object to the notion of selling a playtest to people under the guise of a finished product. I had fun with Sonic Frontiers, I really do love that game in spite of its shortcomings, but selling a beta test at full price is not something I would ever encourage. That said, it's not like Sega didn't do anything to sweeten the deal up a little bit. I think the free DLC roadmap for Sonic Frontiers definitely helped things. Adding the Spin Dash and New Game Plus was a game changer, and it rewards the player for using this new skill for exploration, making the gameplay loop of gaining tokens needed for progression less rigid on replay, yet it still requires you to play the game as it was originally intended, as you couldn't unlock the Spin Dash until at least the final base Oranos Island on a clean save. I actually think That's a really good move to sweeten the deal up. Do fans still like having the spin dash back? I don't know, let's find out. Let's put the spin dash in the game. For free. Final Horizon was a 6-hour campaign with 3 new playable characters and a brand new gameplay loop added to the game for free. And it needed to be, because if we'd paid any extra for that lack of polish, sheesh, there'd be riots in the street. But it did prove to be, in my opinion, a stronger Final Island than the original base game, so it did what it needed to do, and I got some really cool stuff out of it. If you could get on board with Sonic Frontiers' very weird experimental and feedback-based rollout, there was lots of fun to be had. But I really don't think this game can ask for any further leeway now. When all is said and done, it's a shoddy product that's very enjoyable where it counts in spite of its obvious shortcomings. And while I'd like to see those problems fixed, they shouldn't really have been problems in the first place at the end of the day. When you buy a game, you do buy it under the assumption that it's going to be a finished, professionally made product, and Sonic Frontiers just doesn't reflect that quality, and I think they know that. Yes, there's a lot I'd like to see fixed, but I wouldn't be happy with it being in a separate paid release. But I do think there is a way to get a Sonic Frontiers Definitive Edition right. Sonic X Shadow Generations barely even touched the original Sonic Generations title, focusing primarily on the new Shadow campaign, which effectively doubled the size of the original release. For Sonic Generations, there were small additions like Chow Hunting, which gave long-term fans a reason to check out Sonic Generations again, but the real selling point was Shadow Generations. Rather than piddling around and trying to backpedal on any weaknesses with Sonic Generations, aside from the story script, they instead opted to create a new game that builds upon the concept and expands upon some of the weaker aspects of the original title, such as the hub world, which was now a fully 3D open zone. I think if they're going to do a Frontiers re-release, this would be the way to go. If you want people to pay for the game again, it needs to focus primarily on new content first and foremost, rather than just fixing problems that should not have existed in the first place. And I think a great way to approach this would be to have an entirely new, unique island. No, not just extra building blocks on top of an existing one, I mean an actual new biome. And to have a side campaign featuring Sonic, Amy, and Metal Sonic that ties into that fourth movie. This new campaign would need to be at least 4 hours long and be comprised of entirely new assets and locations, and that applies to cyberspace too. Maybe the open zone could even be set in cyberspace and explore what Amy was up to during her time on cyberspace. And we could actually showcase what cyberspace was like for her. Perhaps she could meet and interact with simulations of the ancients before their demise and learn more about the threat that they're facing. Tails and Knuckles could join her for the adventure. You could call it Amy Frontiers. And because cyberspace is built upon memories and fear, maybe that's where Metal Sonic could come in. But because he's a cyberspace clone, he's got digital powers and is scarier than ever before. It could all culminate in a boss fight between Amy and a cyberspace replicant of Metal Overlord trying to escape cyberspace and become real. This could be where maybe modern Amy gets a super form, and that could be sick. The potential for a Sonic Frontiers expansion is absolutely there. However, I do think we also need to take some notes from Sonic Origins Plus, oddly enough, given that I actually hate the release rollout of Sonic Origins. We really did pay for that digital deluxe crap for no reason, didn't we? See, unlike Sonic Generations, Sonic Frontiers' problems are a lot more glaring, and I think bringing back that same shoddy product is just going to be a massive missed opportunity. At the very least, the pop-in should be fixed, of course it should, but I think the way to go with that would be patching the original Sonic Frontiers base game, at least offering a patch for players of the original version, so you can get bug fixes for the original game, but you would need to pay for the full product if you want Amy Generations, maybe with a discount. I think a key difference is that if Sega wants us to double dip on Sonic Frontiers, they need to do both. They've got to give the base game some TLC and bring in an additional campaign. Otherwise, they're A, re-releasing an unfinished product, or B, charging for the product to be finished after we already bought it. And neither of those are good business practices. They do happen with other studios, but either way, it's a bad practice. It's bad when they do it, it would be bad when Sega does it. And since I tend to talk about Sonic, and I don't tend to talk about other games, I'm naturally going to talk about it more with Sonic. At the end of the day, though, I think it is too soon to revisit Sonic Frontiers again. Typically, remasters trot along because of a changing console generation, and the new technology allows them to do things they couldn't have done the first time around. We're still in the same general console generation right now, with the Switch 2 being the only real shift, but even then, is the Switch 2 more a product of the PS5 and Xbox Series generation? And was the Switch 1 not part of the PS4 and Xbone generation? I think there will be a time to revisit Sonic Frontiers. If the next mainline game is closer to the quality of Shadow Generations, Sonic Frontiers will become obsolete pretty quickly. As soon as we have an open-zone Sonic game that is polished, it's over for Sonic Frontiers. It will rot on the shelf as a first attempt, and that's not a bad problem for the sequel to have, but I would love to see a devoted, ground-up remake of Sonic Frontiers that properly explores the civilization of the ancients and brings the Starfall Islands more in line with their concept art. Just not yet. The game's not obsolete yet. I'd much rather they just focus on what's coming up next for now. Hell, things like the ancient civilization could easily be explored in the IDW comics. I really want them to bring back some of the adaptations that they used to do in the Archie era. Why should we keep falling back on Sonic Forces as canon when we could just rework its story in a comic? And then treat that as the canon version. I'm pretty on board with Sega kind of going back and fixing up some of the weaker points in their history. But it's got to actually become history first, which Sonic Frontiers isn't. It's the most recent mainline game. Maybe it's time to just move on. Now, where would I be without the generosity of my trusty patrons? We're going to start with a shout out for the patrons in the $10 and above tiers. We have Just Another Evil Robot Clone Seeking Revenge, Xander Wolf, Ghostly Phantom, Twilord, KB, Sad Goku, Dare Denny, Kale Bennett. If I had more space, I'd explain that. It's taken me way too long to update this. And Mr. SP, Sirius the Skeptic, and Biotin. And now, on to the patrons in the $5 and above tier. We've got Joseph Tribble, Press Play to Jason, Gideon Wells, Basic Content, Ben Raven, Reese Burns, Manalza, Goat Cannon, Silver, Josh Strider, Grant Allen, Marv Animation, Cho Henshin, RT0, Carl X, SSS06, and Vera Wild. Thank you, good folks, so much for your generosity. The video's now over. Get out.